Every few years, Republicans around the country and in D.C. and those aspiring to join their ranks seem to create a new litmus test. Who can defeat our Cold War foes? Who can get rid of the most environmental regulations and destroy our country fast enough? Who can make sure no woman ever gets to make another decision about her body ever again? And of course, the litmus test du jour. Who can be the most creatively cruel to the trans community? If you want to be the GOP nominee, it better be you. Thing is, they don't need a new litmus test because the current one, jerks who had to go to prom with their moms, is serving them just fine. So yeah, it's not going to surprise you that I have some very serious choice words for those in our country who seem to spend every minute of every day writing new legislation to target trans men, women, and children for sport. For those that these bills attack, it is a life and death matter because for so many, the very health care that keeps them alive is at stake. Many early bills, luckily, were never allowed to be enacted because they were deemed unconstitutional by the courts. Unfortunately, in places like Tennessee, a recent circuit court has allowed trans healthcare bans to go into effect. Come on, Tennessee. You are making Dolly Parton mad. The thing is, these bills and their authors, they know who they're hurting. They are dehumanizing vulnerable people, many of whom are children, and that is a slippery slope, one which personally I don't want to see what is at the bottom of. This is Choice Words. I'm Samantha Bee, and for my guest today, this topic and conversation is very personal. Raquel Willis joined me to talk about her own journey because regardless of court decisions or political charades, she will continue to exist, and I am so grateful that she shared so much with me. So take a listen and make good choices. I'm thrilled to be talking to you today. Oh my goodness. I have followed you for so long and I love your voice. I love your work. And so I'm a huge fan. So this is like a complete delight. Okay. All right. We have so much to talk about. But before I'd like to ease into the conversation by talking about the concept of choice and making decisions. And I am sure that there are just a ton of choices that you reflect on as life-changing. But which one stands out as maybe the most consequential to you?
What a question.
It's a tough one.
The most consequential decision in my life. I mean, I would say that it's an unfolding decision. So maybe I'm cheating with my answer, but
no, I love unfolding decisions and choices. I love that.
Yeah, but I think it's the unfolding decision to listen to my inner voice and listen to my truth. And so with that, and throughout my memoir, The Risk It Takes to Bloom, that is forthcoming, I chronicle some of those different moments. And so one of those earliest moments was kind of owning that I was different, being bullied by peers for being queer, being gender nonconforming, kind of owning, okay, well, I guess I am different. And if that makes me a target, it is what it is, right? But the owning of my difference was a decision. I think the decision to tell my dad I wanted to grow my hair out because it was one of the only things that I felt like I could do to kind of live in that gender nonconformity as a kid. That was a decision, right? The decision to come out as gay at 14 and 15 to my parents, to come out as trans around 2021. There's been so many, but I think they're all linked together with this decision to listen to my inner voice.
To listen to your inner voice. What do you think, did that crystallize into a moment where you were like, I gotta go with my gut more? Or what was the catalyst for you to just totally articulate that for yourself?
Well, I think the first big moment for that articulation came when I shared that I was gay. And so I say
Mhm.
gay with kind of an asterisk because I, of course, learned that I was a bit more than that. I was also
Right.
a transgender girl slash woman in the becoming. But
Mhm.
when I came out to my father, he kind of thought of it as a phase and didn't have the best reaction. And you can kind of picture what it was like for me to come out to my very traditional Black Southern parents who were also hella Catholic. And when I say
Wow.
Catholic, I mean front pew every Sunday Catholic. I
Okay.
mean talk to the priest and shake his hand after the Mass Catholic. I mean, my parents
Right.
taught Sunday school. My mom received an award from our bishop for her service to the church Catholic.
Okay. We are like blood of Christ
Period.
Catholic. Okay. Okay. Very challenging. How I mean, I guess, how did you find that within yourself?
Mm.
That's such a young age. You're so vulnerable. You're having all of these. How did you find the inner wisdom and strength to be like, look, I can't be anything other than who I am. So here you go.
Well, I have to give a lot of nuanced gratitude to my
Hmm.
parents. I mean, my parents were very loving parents, very invested in my future, amazing parents. And yet, like so many parents, were ill equipped to understand
Right.
my queerness and my transness and what that would mean for my future. I think they were fearful, of course, of what safety would look like for me as I matured.
Right.
But also, I mean, there was an element of disappointment, right? And shame, and
Hmm.
guilt, because I think especially for a lot of parents, in that time in the mid kind of 2000s, the idea that you would have a queer or a trans child, it kind of led you to questions of like, well, where did I go wrong? What did I do
Right.
to create this person
Right.
that I don't really have any tools to support in the way that I thought I might have. So I
Right.
have to say, even with that, my parents always raised me to be a critical thinker, and to make decisions for myself. I mean, they really instilled in us the ability to think for ourselves.
Okay. So they set they helped set the conditions for you to be strong and for you to think for yourself. And then once you were thinking for yourself, your dad was like, well, maybe you're thinking too much for yourself. Just a little too much
Unwittingly,
thought.
they set in motion this path for me to become my brilliant trans self.
Did you ever, like, after your dad responded in a not ideal way, did you ever question whether you should continue to tell people? Did it put doubt in your heart?
No, honestly, I saw it as a necessary risk to take so that I could come out at school.
Right.
Because one of the
Right.
hardest things for me as someone who was very deeply, in tune, I guess, with my inner voice and convictions. I hated going to school, and peers would ask me. It kind of moved from the overt bullying when I was super young of
Mhm.
you're a sissy, you're like a girl, all of these things, to this kind of like more mature curiosity. And so people would ask, so are you gay? Like, what's going on? One girl was like, are you metrosexual? Because that was like
Oh,
one of the hot things, the hot
that's
labels at
right.
the time. Such BS, you know. I- but
Oh my god.
I hated having to say no. Like that felt like the biggest betrayal to myself. I wanted to live my
Right.
truth, and I knew I couldn't do that if I didn't at least tell my family, the people who were
Right.
closest to me first. Whether or not they were affirming or accepting, I needed to do that. And so
You needed
it was difficult, it was scary. I wish his initial reaction was better,
Mhm.
but it was a gateway for me to tell my truth to the rest of
Right.
my peers and live out the rest of my high school experience with less shame. So it was one
Right.
of the best
Shame.
things I ever could have done at that age.
Oh my God. Like untethering yourself from shame
Hmm.
is so hard to do. It's hard to do, but it's just creates it carves out a whole path for yourself that was previously unimaginable, right?
It does. And I think honestly, I know in our discourse, at least in the popular sense, so much of our discussion around gender identity, around being transgender, is what makes us different. And I actually don't know that that is the most fruitful way to talk about gender and identity. I actually think we need to be talking about the fact that it's not only trans people who are bucking up against gendered expectations, it's all of us, right? So when I'm talking about transgender liberation, and in the sense that we deserve this world where we can all freely express ourselves without barriers and judgment, I'm talking about a world where cisgender people, boys and men in particular, can have every human emotion and not be locked out of
Right.
certain things for fear of betraying their identities, or for cisgender women and girls who are told they can't be strong, brilliant, capable leaders. Um, if they don't, bow to the patriarchy. I think we have to be able to have these conversations around how we're all at a disadvantage by a lot of these gendered expectations.
Oh, yeah. Like there's just on the big spectrum of what a person can be, we're all just on that spectrum and we shouldn't have to like carry the yoke
Right.
of previous, like old thinking, like old ancient generations of thinking about like what we're supposed to do and the role we play. It's all different. It's all blown out.
Hmm.
And that is it feels like an opportunity. It's an opportunity.
It is. I mean, I think if more cisgender people kind of understand how bound their destinies are with transgender and non-binary folks, there's a lot of, creativity and innovation that can come, that will support you in building the life that you deserve. Because right now, not only are trans people not fully able to live the lives that we deserve because of these systems of oppression, but everyone is
Yeah.
dealing with those same issues as well.
I agree with you. I think like the fight for bodily autonomy
Hmm.
essentially touches every issue
It
in
does.
everybody's lives that are important to people. They just don't quite make the connection
Hmm.
in ways that they should. Anyway, you're helping people make those connections.
I
Very
hope
important.
so.
Oh, yes. Want to listen to the rest of this episode? Head over to your favorite podcast player to hear the entire show. I highly recommend it.